Assalamu alaikum, dear brothers and sisters. Welcome to this new video. Today I will share a true story that happened recently in Gaza. It is a story of the mercy of Allah. It is a miracle that occurred during one of the most difficult periods. It is a powerful reminder of the importance of faith in the midst of incessant strikes in Gaza. One man, a Muslim, was killed. He was seriously injured. His body was broken. He was bleeding abundantly. It was obvious that he had nothing left. He did not have much time left. People around him understood that his soul was about to leave. The Imam hurried to his side. He leaned over and spoke softly to the man whose breath was growing weaker. Allah, he repeated firmly. The man struggled to speak, but he encouraged him to say it. He repeated his words, urging the dying man to pronounce them. This reminded him of what had happened. Prophet Muhammad, the man whose last words were La ilaha illallah, would enter paradise. The man fought against the intense pain, trying to speak. The Imam encouraged him, saying, say it, say Allah. Then, in a final effort, the man managed to pronounce distinctly. These were his last words. He died immediately after declaring the Shahada, while the Imam stood there, overwhelmed by the significance of what he had just witnessed. An old woman approached, weeping uncontrollably. She said, "Oh, Imam, this man was my son." The Imam, seeking to comfort her, told her not to cry excessively. He explained that her son's death in the way of Allah is a great honor and a sign of Allah's grace. The Imam was overwhelmed. The woman approached, crying uncontrollably. She said, "Oh, Imam, this man was my son." The Imam told her not to cry too much because her son had left with La ilaha illallah on his lips, which was a huge honor and a sign that Allah had granted him a place in heaven. He had also recited this verse of the Quran, and he told her not to say that of those who were killed on the way to Allah that they died. On the contrary, they are alive. But you don't have any consciousness. The sobs of the sea were only getting more intense. She fell to the ground, overwhelmed. The confused Imam asked why she was crying so much. He asked her if her son was with Allah, honored with a beautiful death. He recited the verse of the Quran, and those who are killed on the way to Allah, it is not that they have died, but they are alive. The sobs of the sea intensified. She fell to the ground, overwhelmed. The confused Imam asked, "Why are you crying?" "Your son is with Allah, honored with a beautiful death." The mother raised her head, and, through her tears, said, "Imam, I don't cry with sadness. I cry because my son was deaf and mute. He never uttered a word in his entire life." The Imam remained frozen. His heart invaded with a deep sense of respect. The woman continued, in shock. He couldn't hear or speak, but in these last moments, Allah gave him the ability. The mother raised her head, and, through her tears, said, "Imam, I don't cry with sadness. I cry because my son was deaf and mute. He never uttered a word in his entire life." The Imam remained frozen. His heart was filled with a deep sense of respect. The woman continued, her voice quivering with emotion. He couldn't hear or speak, but in these last moments Allah had given him the ability to hear and speak so that he could say La ilaha illallah. The Imam fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and cried, "Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah is the most merciful, the most lenient." The mother raised her head. Her face was still flooded with tears, but she had a light of hope in her eyes. She told how her son had grown up communicating only in silence. The Imam fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, and cried, "Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah is the most merciful, the most lenient." His mother raised her head, face still flooded with tears, but with a light of hope in her eyes. She told how her son had grown up communicating only with his looks. Despite his handicap, he had always shown unwavering faith, praying silently at every salat, following the movements of prayer with a right devotion. His silent faith spoke louder than words, and his exemplary behavior was a source of inspiration for all who knew him. The Imam always listened attentively to the words of the mother. Despite his handicap, he had always shown unwavering faith. He prayed silently at every salat, following the movements of prayer with rare devotion. His silent faith spoke louder than words, and his exemplary behavior was a source of inspiration for all who knew him. The Imam, always on his knees, listened attentively to the words of the mother with a heart filled with admiration. He was renewed with admiration for this young man who had to stay close to Allah despite the obstacles. The crowd that had gathered around them listened in silence, touched by this story. A murmur ran through the assembly as a breath of hope, strengthening their faith in the power of Allah and in His ability to transform even the darkest moments. The mother confidently declared that her son had shown a new depth in his eyes and had been spending more and more time in prayer, as if awaiting something. She firmly believed that this was a sign that he felt the nearness of his encounter with Allah. The mother confidently asserted that her son's recent change in behavior was a clear indication of his impending encounter with Allah. This final moment, when he recited the Sharia, marked the conclusion of a life dedicated to faith. Despite the pain of loss, she found profound peace in her belief that his son had been welcomed into the mercy of Allah. The Imam rose slowly, wiping away her tears, and addressed the crowd gathered. "See this sign? This is not merely a miracle for this mother, it is a reminder to all of us. We have the ability to speak, hear, and communicate. Yet, how often do we forget to praise Allah and witness to our faith? How often do we let our voices get lost in vain words instead of elevating our invocations to the heavens?" He invited everyone to meditate on the meaning of life. This is a miracle for this mother and her son. It reminds us of our ability to speak, hear, and communicate. Yet, we often forget to praise Allah and witness to our faith. We let our voices get lost in vain words instead of elevating our invocations to the heavens. He invited everyone to meditate on the meaning of their lives. He wanted us to remember that every moment may be the last. He also wanted us to know that the way we choose to live now will determine the end of our journey on this earth. He exhorted us to live every day as if it were the last. He wanted us to use every breath to remember the greatness of Allah and to prepare for this ultimate moment when each will face his Creator. Meanwhile, he urged them to live each day as if it were their last, to use every breath to honor Allah and prepare for this ultimate moment when each will face their Creator. Meanwhile, the sea, though broken, comforted him in the certainty that his child had been honored by a hunger that many do not. She spent her days praying for his son and for all those who had heard his story, hoping that this testimony would guide them to the light of Allah. Life continued, but this story remained in the hearts of many as a living reminder of the power and infinite grace of Allah, a sign that even in the most difficult circumstances, there's always hope. Moments may be unexpected, but there's always a way towards the light for those who believe and maintain hope. My brothers and sisters, this story is true. A recent miracle happened in Gaza. She told us about the infinite mercy of Allah and the power of the Shahuda. A man who is mute since birth received the ability to speak for the first and last time in his life, so that these last words may bear testimony to the uniqueness of Allah. This story is a testament to the infinite mercy of Allah and the power of the Shahuda. It's a powerful reminder for all of us. Do we live in such a way that our last words may be La ilaha illallah? Do we use the abilities Allah has given us, our voice, our strength, our life, to serve Him? Are we preparing for the afterlife? The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "When Allah loves a servant, He rewards his last actions virtuous." We must pray that Allah grants us the honor of pronouncing La ilaha. We must live our lives in such a way that our final words are La ilaha illallah. We must use the abilities that Allah has given us, our voice, our strength, our life, to serve Him and prepare for the afterlife. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, said, "When Allah loves a servant, He rewards his last actions with virtue." We must pray that Allah grants us the honor of pronouncing La ilaha as our last word, that He forgives our shortcomings, guides us to righteousness, and reunites us with those we love. This story of Gaza in paradise is a sign for each of us, a reminder that even in the midst of pain and trials, the mercy of Allah is always close. We are grateful for the donation of Islam and the promise of paradise. May Allah help our brothers and sisters suffering throughout the world and bring us all together in heaven.